Then it's time to get started. Welcome, this is Jenkins 101, Getting Started. So if you've actually been using Jenkins for a while, this should all bore you silly. If you haven't used Jenkins and you want to know what it is, this is the place to be. I use Jenkins at work, and recently we moved Jenkins, about 300 jobs, from 2 Jenkinses. Yes? If you've been using it badly, you may actually come out ahead. So we had about 300 Jenkins jobs on 2 Jenkins servers, and we moved to a completely new data center, so we had to move them all across. We now have them on 3 servers, and a new one coming up on our recovery system, the other production site. And we cleaned up a lot while we were doing it, so I learned a few things. So some of that's going to seep through. So let's start with, what is Jenkins? Although hopefully you knew a little of that before you chose to come. It's one of those continuous integration tools. There's several of them out there. Travis CI is the other major competitor. It is written in Java and uses Tomcat, but it just runs, and basically you never even need to notice. It's a fork from Hudson, which is sort of important because as we look at plugins along the way and other things that it prints out occasionally, it's going to say Hudson. That's not an accident. It's because it's something from before the fork. And I can move the mouse. I'm going to need the mouse later, but I'll move it now. And lastly, Jenkins is jobs, and jobs can run in many different ways. Some of them you can set up to run on a schedule, like cron. It's a very cron-like thing. We're going to talk about how that works later. You can have jobs that you come in and a human pushes the button and says, it's time now, like when I push to production. And you can have jobs that get fired by other jobs. We have one job that fires off the next one, and it's actually 10 jobs deep. So if something goes wrong in the middle, then you get confused and have to go figure out where it went wrong, but otherwise it takes care of itself. To install Jenkins, these are the Unix instructions for both major flavors of packaging systems. The top one is apt-get, and the bottom one is yum. So that's Red Hat and the other guy, and the Debian world, between the two of them. You go out, you wget your piece, give it to your package manager, and then install it. This link at the bottom, that's very prominent from their website, takes you there, and it shows you this stuff, which I cut and paste from there, and Windows versions and Mac versions and all the other obscure versions that they choose to have. When you've done that, Jenkins is there. It's running. It's ready to go. And this is what it looks like when you get there the first time. Notice in the very top right corner, between the question mark and the end, it's just a little bit of black there. There's nothing there that says who you are or asking you to log in. It has no concept of users yet. This thing is wide open. Anyone can get here. We're going to take care of that quick. Next, notice the URL ends in 8080. That's the default. I haven't changed it. Some people change it to be /Jenkins. We do that on our servers where there's something else running on that box, so we need some separation. But for our main Jenkins things, we just take both of those away, and the domain itself takes you all the way to Jenkins because that's what the box is for. Down the side here is the navigation that lets you do things. The first thing we're going to do is go in and look at Manage Jenkins. And I installed this on a Linode, the smallest one they sell, and I had already sliced the database down, the entire hard drive down into smaller chunks so I can do different projects and flip back and forth. And when I did it, this first warning comes up. Jenkins looks like it's too small to run. So let's take care of that. We get in here and we see that it likes some swap space and a minimum threshold for how much space it has. If you're on a production or even your stage world, you probably don't want that to be an error. You should give it enough resources. In this case, it's a simple little sample on the smallest server I could find that I've already sliced down. I had a problem. I didn't want it to be a problem, so I turned them all off. I nerfed it. Don't do that with real code. When you're looking at Manage Jenkins, this list is actually much longer than this. These are the ones we're going to talk about today. The important things are we're going to go in and configure the system slightly, fix the security. We're going to make it so it's locked down to just us and not let just anybody in. We're going to install a few plugins. Plugins are very big in the Jenkins world. is sort of their cpan, and they do a little of everything. We're going to add a few nodes so that we can actually run our code on other machines. We're going to give some credentials so we can SSH across to those other machines. We're going to add a user. And the one at the very bottom, which is at the very bottom of the longer list, is tell it you're going to shut down. Don't actually shut down yet, but put it in that almost shut down mode so it stops running jobs and they finish up gracefully. Some of your jobs, you don't want to just quit and pull the rug out from under them. Bad things might happen. The boss might notice zeros not moving around properly. So, Jenkins users, you want to add them, and there's several different ways to do it. This is actually right out of the documentation, gives you your choices, and we're going to pick the simplest of the ways, which is you go to Manage Jenkins, pick that we want the security, and we get in here, and we're going to tell it to add a database, but right now anyone can still do anything. I'm going to mention this fact on a couple different slides. Remember, make sure you exist and have full powers before you start locking people out. Otherwise, you may need some help. If we're using Jenkins' own database, it's just going in and twiddling a file, which we can probably do by ourselves. If you use the LDAP option, you might need somebody bigger than you to come take care of it, but don't go there. Now we can create a user. We've gone in and said that we want to have it take care of a database, and look in the top corner, there's stuff there now. You can either set it that somebody has to create the user for them, or you can just come along and create yourself. You just won't have any powers unless someone's put you in the matrix. So I'm going to go create myself, which I don't have a slide for because it's self-explanatory. Now we're going to go back and fix where we were before. Notice last time it was anyone can do anything. Now it's a matrix. A great many choices, so many I had to cut it in half to make it fit on the screen. And you can customize the privileges you give to individuals or groups at the global level here. So you can have all your developers be able to play with a job, but they can't delete the job and they can't edit the job or any other combination you need. You can also change individual jobs with a thing that looks just like this, but this is the global version. I have some jobs, if you use a plugin, you can say ignore the global versions and only let these people in. So if you have something that's super duper secret, you can lock it down to 2 or 3 people, even if normally it's a much larger group that can do things. Plugins. This is like the modules on cpan. They let you go do things. Usually you can install something new and it just works. If you're going to upgrade, downgrade, or delete it, you're going to need to restart the box. Well, the Jenkins part, because it needs to do some extra stuff under the hood. The publisher, when you actually go out and look at the description, this is the top of the page. They all have them, almost the top of the page. They come with a graph that shows how popular it is over the last couple months. They tell you what it does, what it expects as input, what it expects as output, and all those other things, and it's fairly standardized so that you have a clue what you're doing. In this case, we're going to use this in the first sample job we're going to talk about. This is going to allow us to make an HTML page with our results. In order to add a plugin, you go back to Manage Jenkins, you pick plugins, and there's a very long list. There's actually 3 very long lists. One are the things that are available to upgrade, the ones that are installed, and the ones that you can go out and collect and install. And you go down and you'll see they all have a checkbox and they all have a URL that you can click on, which takes you to the page we just saw. And after you click, it will go and install them and any prerequisites, and they all show up. And then at the bottom here, you have the option to restart if you need to. We didn't need to in this case. A couple others that we're going to talk about later. Nodes and labels. Jenkins has the concept of slaves. These are other machines. So Jenkins resides on the master, and it does stuff here, but you may want to do things on your website or on the API machine or out on the database machine. And it's a little silly to set up the environment here, SSH across to there, set up the environment there, and run your job. So by making a slave out of it, it looks like it's a job just like any other from the Jenkins point of view back here, but it really runs over there, does its stuff over there with the data that's over there, and then sends its artifacts back so you can use them. And nodes and labels let you either get there by using the name of the machine or a group of machines in a creative way that we're going to see later. Validating strings, we have string parameters you can give to a job, and it is just a string. There's nothing there to protect you from bad strings. So I almost always install this one, which we'll see an example of later. So it has a regular expression, Java format, and it will keep your data safe. And last, Git needs a plugin. SVN is built in by default. Git needs to be added, and you need Git 179 or better because they've added a few features that require the newer one. I'm not sure, but for now it needs at least 179. So we're going to create a job. If you go all the way back to the front page, which should look about sort of familiar, you pick new item and it will pop up and give you several choices for types of jobs. I've almost always only used two of them. Either pick freestyle project up top, it's completely blank, you can do anything you want, or if you already have a job that's kind of close to where you're going, clone it, the bottom one, copy an existing one. There are a few others that are built in with already bells and whistles, and I think there's some plugins that'll add even more if that's what you need. The way Jenkins keeps all its stuff is, by default, it puts all its things in var lib Jenkins. And if you don't create your Jenkins user before you go and install this thing with the wget parts up front, that's also Mr. Jenkins's home directory. So if you want him to be home Jenkins, make him first and then make symlinks to the other place for where the stuff really lives. And when you get there, there will be a jobs directory. And inside the jobs directory is a directory for every job we make, and that's where it keeps all the goodies. And inside there is config.xml. That's the file we really care about because all the things we're about to do on the next few pages end up there. There's also a workspace. When you run a job, it starts in the workspace, which is a little confusing because on some of the Jenkinses I have, the workspace is just inside our job directory. So it's jobs, our job, workspace, which is convenient, and I liked it. But then I installed some others, and it goes down to jobs, job name, stuff, and it also went down to jobs, workspace, job name, stuff. So all the workspaces were together, but they're not inside, so you'll have to make sure you get the right one. And in the example we're about to do, I was looking for jobs that I knew I'd done before, and I knew I'd done something close to what I wanted, and I wanted to grep through to find them. Unfortunately, since we only care about config.xml, and there's one for each job, and they're in different directories, it was a pain to use grep and only catch those parts. So I wrote a Jenkins job that will only look there. And that's where we're going to go for our example, which is the live demo now. Here. So this is Jenkins with a few more things on it now. We've got a couple jobs, and we're going to pick config, and this is what a job looks like normally. It'll show you when it has last run. Successful comes out with a blue dot. There is a plugin. You can change it to a green dot. Apparently at some point in the past it defaulted to green, but then they realized 10% of the male population can't tell the difference between green and red, so they switched it to blue. But if you don't like those people, you can get a plugin and turn it back green. So let's go and configure our job. Actually, I've already configured it. It's a rig demo, but we'll look at what we've got here. So if you came in and had just created the brand new job, the only thing on this page that'll be filled in is the name, because you've already given it the name. You can give it a description. You can use a plugin to allow you to actually write HTML and mark it up to make it look better. Otherwise, it just runs it together, but that's your choice. You don't have to have parameters for these things, but some jobs really play better with them. In this case, we're going to have two parameters. We're going to be calling grep, and we want it to go and look just in the directories we care about, just at that one file. So we need to tell grep the pattern to look for, and then, since it is grep, which has a zillion parameters of its own, anything that you put here will pass through to grep. And I default it to -A3, -B3, dash A3, dash B3, and dash N, which is 3 lines after, 3 lines before, and show me the line number. Give me a chance to find the thing that I was looking for. If you haven't installed any slaves yet, and at this point in the discussion we really haven't, this doesn't exist. They will always run on master because that's all that's there. After you've installed slaves now that can be running in more than one place, in some cases you'll want to limit where that runs, particularly things on master, because it usually plays significantly different than all your boxes. So we have jobs that run on the web boxes, a specific box or a group of boxes, and we can do that with a label, and then other jobs that have to run on master because they generally deal with more than one thing at a time, and they will SSH out later, and we'll see an example, to all the boxes. So if you create a job before you make a slave, it will default to master, and it will take care of itself and play like it used to. If you make them afterwards, they can go random, and occasionally you run into trouble with that when it runs someplace you're not expecting. You can have source code management hooked right in. I don't have one hooked up, so it's not here. But if we look at the subversion section, you give it the URL where it's supposed to go looking, and you can have more than one of them and tell it other useful things. And it will go out, and at the beginning of its run, it will check the repository, and if any changes have happened, bring it back and drop it into the workspace so that you always have the freshest. If all your jobs are doing this, the people who manage your repository can get cranky. So we have some jobs that for the scripts that actually make our Jenkins work, they run once a day in the morning, weekdays only, and they will collect it all, bundle it up, make a tarball, and drop it in the approved spot on all the servers everywhere, so that any job that comes along can just expect it to be there and up to date. Oh, let me put that back so I don't forget accidentally. And here is the business end of our job. You can have a shell right in here. You can have any shell you want. It will default to SH. If you want something else, you just put the shebang line on the front like any legitimate file. We have some Jenkins servers where somebody's conveniently gone through and made SH just an alias for bash so that there's no confusion, and it just always runs bash. We have an example later that actually has Perl on this line. So in this case, we need to make sure in our workspace we're going to have a place to put our output, and if there was something there that was from before, we're going to blow it away and make a new one. So that's what the first couple lines are doing. I'm looking for a file in my example that we're going to have, and I want to make sure there's something there, so it's just going to show us what's down in there with the ls. And this block here, especially that part, I almost always put in my jobs. Who am I? What server am I on? And what directory am I in? Particularly when you have slaves in the mix, it's good to know who you are and where you are, because when you find out you're in the wrong place, this will set it as, make it fairly obvious. And the business end of actually making this, we're going to make an HTML page, so we need a header, and we're going to call this function. The reason this is a function and not just straight up is because in bash you can have local but only inside functions. You can't do it at the top level, and I wanted a local variable, so I dropped it down. And we will do a directory, which probably should just be an ls, but dir will default there. And it gets your list of all your jobs that are in the jobs directory, and we'll loop through them, pass into the command grep what you're looking for, all the parameters it needs, and where it's looking, and we'll put the answers in results, a bash variable, that then we can put inside a pre-tag. I actually need to make this slightly smarter because XML is what we're searching through in this case, and XML has lots of angle brackets, which don't look good in HTML unless you flatten them back out. And because we're using this plugin, earlier on the page we said that we were going to call this thing found.html, and what we're going to report it as a title is what we found, and the directory's output, so you have to make this match, and then it will just show up. And if we go and run this, see what I ran last time, leave. Last time around I looked for master, so let's go do that again because I know there's an answer. You pick build with parameters. And I misspelled it, so it's probably not going to find anything with that one. And if we look, it found nothing. Let's try it again, spelling it correctly. And 19 came back. This search is pretty quick. There aren't that many jobs, so grep finish is quick. And in this case, it's found that the word master shows up in these jobs, and this is a URL that you can barely see here, but it goes to the job in question, to its configure page, and will take us straight there so you can find what you're looking for. So that's a simple job. Any questions at this point? Yeah. Yes. If you install a plugin, more parts become available to you. So SVN will also have a Git button right above or below it. I don't remember if it's above or below. And many other things just show up. And if you are not logged in, the Manage Jenkins link won't be there. Or if you are logged in, but you're not of sufficient power to get there, it won't be there. It protects you from yourself. Or maybe more to the point, it protects the rest of us from you. So let's go back and catch the part that I missed. Oh. I was supposed to take a break from the live demo and come back. On the schedule a job section, this is right out of what you would get when you hit the question mark in there. The help on the page is pretty good. And it's very much like cron. It's got the 5 fields. Do what you want to do. And one feature that is nice is that, particularly for minute and hour, you can put an H there. Usually a capital H. I don't know if a small one will work. And what it does is it will pick randomly from within the hour. So instead of always having it run all your jobs right on the hour, you can say pick within the hour, and it will use a hash of the name of the job to help it decide, so it's predictable. Once it's picked when it's going to be, it'll always be the same. So I have some jobs, I put H, and it just runs at the 15 minutes after the hour. And one interesting choice, one of my favorites, is this one, is schedule it for a school night. We have most of my team in San Francisco. I'm in Wilmington, 3 hours ahead of them. And our servers, even though they aren't there, pretend that they are on UTC, 4 hours ahead of me this time of year, 5 hours in the summer. So we have a job, I gave it H 6 through 11, star, 1 through 5, which means work days in the morning, so it's between 6 and 11, 6 and noon in London, and those other times, that's when it's going to run. So we use this for the job that actually pushes Jenkins scripts out. So if you mess up Friday night, it's not going to happen in a Saturday morning push and be broken all weekend. Worst case is it's broken Monday morning and someone can fix it pretty quick. Now let's move on to slaves. They probably should come up with a more 21st century word for this, but nobody's told me what it is yet. Ooh, I like minion. Minion could work. So we're going to make some users on other machines. In this particular example, our second user is on the same actual server, but at work, what we usually do is we have two users, a Jenkins user and an app user. So the app user owns most of the code and does most of the work, but a few things we let the Jenkins user do, such as bouncing the server using the trick I showed in my lightning talk, which I may show again at the end of this if we have time. So we need to go to the servers in question, make sure we have a group for him and a user for him. So add group and add user group. Group add and user add are the two Unix commands. We only need to install Java over on the other servers. We don't need to install all of Jenkins, and just putting Java there is enough, and then when Jenkins calls across, he can take care of the rest. And we're going to set up SSH connections. And for those of us who have forgotten how to do SSH connections in a Unix world, on the master, as Jenkins will go in, we'll make sure we have a .ssh directory, and we will create a key. In this case, I'm going to put a comment that key, and I'm going to pick the file name so it doesn't go out in the default place. And then I'm going to see the ls from it to see that they're there, and there should be two of them. The public version is the small one on the bottom, and the other one is the private version. Private version, of course, never ever sees the light of day off this server, or maybe in the vault. And the public version you send to all the places that are going to need it. Remember to set your permissions correctly. If you don't do that, then SSH doesn't like to work. So the directory needs to be 700 so you can read, write, and execute it. No one else can get close. And the keys will take care of themselves because we just generated them. In order to call over there to the other side, we don't want to type out its whole domain name every time and which key we want. We want to set that up. So in your SSH config, you need an entry for each place you're going to go. I generally do it with a dash in the middle, the server I'm going to, and the user I want to be when I get there. And then you need to give it a hostname, user, and which key file to use. This works if you're getting there in one hop. If you have to bounce through some other machines on the way, then you'll be needing a forward agent and a proxy. And those are just two more lines to add. You can find that online. Over on the other side, we need to give him the keys. I did it as I was root because I was already there, but you can do it as the user himself. And we need to make sure, actually, I did do it as the user himself. I became him, sudo su Mr. Prod, who's my other user. And we go through and give him an SSH directory. We make sure there's a file there for authorized keys, so I just touched it. And then we put the key in there using the editor of your choice, or just echo if you're a bold person. Remember, permissions are important. SSH will not work if you don't set it right. So the directory is 700, read, write, and execute for you only. And the file is 600. You can't execute it. You can read and write it. No one else can get close. And if you forget this, your SSH connection will fail, and it will not give you a pleasant error to let you know that's what you did wrong. It'll take you a while. Back inside Jenkins, now that we have a key over there, we can set it up to get there. So go to Manage Credentials, and we're going to add a credential. And our choice is SSH with a private key. And when you get there, you can give it a username on the other end, a description so you know what it's used for. And somehow you have to give it the key. And one of the choices is read it from a file. And since it's already in his space, that's the easiest solution. We need a slave node so we can get there. So we're going to make a new node. We're going to give it a name, in this case localhost, because that's where we are. And Mr. Prod is his name. I probably should have called it sample because that's what I put on the other thing earlier, but they both work. And when you get in here, the top, again, the name will be filled in for you. The rest of it you have to take care of. And you can have a label. A label is a group of machines. I haven't quite found the spot where you can be a label and say, add this machine and this machine and this machine. You have to do it in the other order. So you have to go to each one and say, and you are going to be in this group and this group and this group, which seems annoying to me, but it might exist. Now back to some live demo. We're just going to make sure the server's there. We're not doing anything fancy in this demo. So it has a name. And in this case, we're using the node feature, which wasn't a choice before, but it is now. If we go to the add parameters, it shows you all the choices you have, and you can add them in. So if you're using the node choice for a variable, it will show you a list of every node that exists, starting with master and then all the others, and you can select the defaults. You could actually run it on more than one, or you can leave that blank and force someone to choose. And at the bottom, you can choose the ones it's allowed to run on. So if you have things that can only run on your database server, you only select them in here, and that'll lock everything else out. You can also allow it to run on more than one or not. And in this case, it's a very short executable. Again, we have my three favorite lines: who am I, where am I, and what am I doing? And then we're just going to do the directory where we are, echo the workspace directory name, and then do a directory there. And workspace is given to you. That variable exists. It's one of about a dozen, maybe 2 dozen default variables that are given to you. And you always start in workspace. So if you're going to go somewhere else, you have to take care of that. But you're supposed to play in your own sandbox and stay in the workspace. And if we build with parameters, going to run this one on master, and when it comes back, we can click on the job and see the console output, which will show you who started it and where it ran. So it's building on master, and what it ran. In this case, I didn't put a bash line on the front, so it only ran as shell, which is okay on the simple things, but once you get a little more complicated, you'll probably want to make sure it's bash. And it shows that we ended up as the right user, in the right directory, in the workspace, and what's there. So that's how you use a slave using the nodes method. Or you can do it with a label, which is a lot like the last job, except here it's a label, and you'll be asked to type in the label, and the default is already there, so it already says production. And if we build this one, it should run about the same, and we see that this one ran remotely on a machine in the group that we called production. So it's localhost Mr. Prod, and the answers are about the same as we expected. Other things you can do in here are, you can see the changes. There weren't any. The build information, this is where you can change the name that shows up along this column over here. Normally it was saying build 9, build 10, build 11, and just the date stamp. If you want to be able to find these things again, you put a name here and change that up. There is a plugin that lets you cause that to happen during the build itself. I haven't managed to install it yet. You can also see the parameters so that you know what this particular one did. And the related one is the master loop. So this job runs on master, not out on one of the children. And this is for something cord was unattached. So in things like our release process, the job runs on master. It collects all its goodies and then sends them out to all the machines. And I don't want to have to write this differently for the production environment and the backup production environment and the staging and the lesser staging. So I abstracted out as much as I could, and each of those environments has a file that has a couple of arrays in it. And in this case, I just put the arrays straight up in the script. You could do like I do, and you put the couple of arrays in each of the different environment files and source that file in, which will let you have almost the same code for all the jobs, but they work in completely different places because we pulled that stuff out. So in Bash, an array is just with the equal and the parenthesis sign, and then a list of things. White space separated usually works. And in this example, I only have one. It's a little bit quicker, and it's all I ever bothered to make. And then we have two for loops, one to loop through the destination, all the servers we're going to, and then we're going to loop through all the users that exist over there, and we're going to SSH across and do something. Yes, it's a very boring something in this case, but you can have your script sitting over there to do all the parts once you get there. So I just have it echo, where am I going? So they'll all show up in a row, and then in between, do whatever it needs to do. In this case, just tell me where I am. And if we run this one, notice it just says build now. It doesn't have any parameters because we didn't have any. And this bar here, sometimes it's really quick and shows you that it finishes. Sometimes Jenkins gets confused and just keeps showing you that it's not done, even though it really is. If you reload the page, it'll take care of it. And the other thing about that bar is if the job always takes 5 minutes, it'll always look back and say, last time was 5 minutes, so I'll scale my bar to be 5 minutes, and the bar will move across the same. If it died quickly and badly last time, so it only took 10 seconds, the bar will think it's a 10-second thing, and it will go all the way to the end, even though it's not done, and it'll keep flashing. I'm working on it, even though it looks like it's done. And what we get here is it looped through, and we only had the loop hit one thing, so it says we went there, and that's the server name, and that's my username. And that's, oh, one last thing that I really, really want to get in, starting and stopping. Probably should be earlier in the slides, terribly important. Remember earlier we had that link at the very bottom of the configuration that says, hey Jenkins, I'm going to shut down soon. I want you to stop running things. And that's this first one, the quiet down mode. If you do that, you'll be able to unquiet down. I'll show you the link in a minute, which is cancel quiet down. But there's other things you can choose: start, stop, restart, status, and force reload. And those things you can do either through a URL or from the command line. And let's go back and look at that. We go to Jenkins, manage Jenkins, prepare to shut down. It will put this big bar across the top. I'm shutting down. You should be mindful of this. It will have any jobs that have been scheduled will show up here that they want to run. And then this link here, cancel, is that link I showed you on the last slide, which lets you undo this. Otherwise, after everything has shut down appropriately, you should go and do the restart or stop or whatever else you need to do. Question? Yeah. I think it finishes all the jobs downstream, too. I think so. I think I've watched that happen. Out of cancel mode before I forget. And that's it. That's the part I really wanted to get through. We have some time left. So questions, and then when we finish the questions, if there's still time, I want to do my lightning talk again, 7 minutes, because I fixed a couple slides. So, any questions? Yeah. Yes, we're on a 1-something Jenkins. The Jenkins 2s are out, but at some point, if it's not Baroque, don't fix it. So we haven't moved. Thinking about it. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. That was Jenkins. And now let me do the other one. So, as we just saw in the Jenkins talk, occasionally you want your Jenkins user to do something a little bit special, like restart a server. And he can't do that just as him. He needs to be able to become someone a little more special with sudo. We want to find a nice simple way to manage that without giving away the store. So this is sudo from a folder for the slightly trusted user. Plan A. Interactively become root. You can either sudo su or sudo-i. Either way, it will become root if you know the password and are in the list lineup to be allowed to do such a thing, and you will be root on the command line. This is not practical for us because we don't want to go interactive. So let's go with sudo and a command, in this case ls. It's still going to ask for a password and you still have to be in the list, which is a bit of a problem. So that's not quite right. And even to get on the list, we'd have to go and edit sudoers. Sudoers is a file. It's special. You can't even edit with your own editor of choice. You have to use vi sudo, which will protect you from yourself a bit. In this case, you can see these groups and these users are allowed to do anything, and they can become the root and have full power. The % means group, without means user. I actually had one recently. Ran into it last night fixing my slides. I had it in front of my name as a group, and that didn't work. I could be a multiple personality, but I don't know, and neither do I. So plan B. We don't want to use our password. We want to give Jenkins some power. You can tell him he's allowed to do a few things without a password. So username, no password, and you have to exactly say what he can do with all the parameters that are going to go along with it. If you do this, then you have to come back, and if you add another feature, this is to restart and start the server. If you wanted to also allow him to turn it off, -D, you'd have to come in and add a third one to the list, which can be a bit of a pain. So, plan C. This is the important part, the secret, the thing that you, if you only remember one thing from the lightning talk, is this: you can actually put a directory name in here. The important bit is you put a slash on the end, because that slash means this is a directory, and this user, without a password, is allowed to run as sudo anything directly in that directory, not anything in a subdirectory, and parent directories are right out. Has to be in that directory. So our plan, we're going to let our developers, our DevOps, our sysadmins, and other trusted people, semi-trusted people, build their code wherever they do it, put it in the repository wherever it normally goes, and using our normal release mechanisms, make sure it shows up on the servers we care about. And then the very trusted person is going to go across there and copy the files that are important on this particular machine into the directory, so that our slightly trusted user, in this case Jenkins, can come along later and deal with it. The example version is going to put it in home Jenkins, his home user, home directory, sudoable, and we're also going to make a private directory in here to hold a script that's going to make life easier later. One change from the last time, some of you have seen this. You might not want to actually put it in his home directory. Since he owns the parent directory, he could rename your root directory, push it out of the way, put his thing in there, and do whatever he damn well feels like. So you probably want to put it somewhere where it's root all the way up. I'm suggesting maybe sudoable, or maybe sudoable Jenkins, wherever. Just put it someplace a little bit safer. But the sample still plays through. And we're going to put a script down in this private directory, which is going to make life a little bit easier. What we're going to do with this, I split it up over 3 slides. Occasionally you'll see next slide for the part to insert here. We're going to be copying from the place we check it out of the repository into our special place. If it doesn't exist at all, my head is... Oh, the special part on this one is, If it is our special script, the one that actually does the copying, we're going to drop it into the private spot. Otherwise, we're going to drop it straight into sudoable. When you go to look, we're going to look and see if the thing you're trying to copy even exists. If the file's not there where you got it out of the repo, say it's not there, and then show the things that are there because it's probably a typo. Otherwise, show a diff of the version you're about to install and the version you have installed. If it's a new thing, it'll say there's nothing to diff. If there was something there, it'll show you the change so you can see if the person who gave you the script to install is pulling a fast one or playing by the rules. You are the trusted human. You're supposed to make sure they're not getting into trouble. And lastly, we want to actually copy the file and move it from point A to point B. And this is some Jenkins, some bash that will do that. And it asks you, are you sure you want to? And you can say, copy it or delete it, take it out of the sudoable place, or anything else. We'll skip down and just say, you're skipping it this time. And now some samples. Remember earlier we had two things he could do. He could start the script and he could restart the script. So we have put those two lines instead of straight up in etc. sudoer. We have put them in scripts that are now in sudoable that he can call. So he would call it as home Jenkins sudoable script name. And he doesn't have to give any parameters because everything is baked into the script. All he can do is start this application and restart this application. He can't get creative. But you can get creative if you want to. You can allow him to pass parameters because it's in the directory. It's allowed. We don't have to list every single combination like we did in Plan B. And another change from the last time some of you have seen this, it now has quotes around our variables to keep us a little bit safer, and a to-do here reminding you to sanitize your variables so that you don't allow anybody to do anything bad. There's not room for it on the slide, so it's been skipped. But there's a reminder here in case you need it. So in this case, it's just we have a log file. The logs come from the web server. They're owned by somebody who's not us, so we need to upgrade our permissions in order to be able to read them. And that's it. Thank you. Jenkins for many things. I use it to push the code out to the better environments, production and the staging servers. We also have it run jobs cron-like, so I work for a bank and we move money around at certain times of the day, so some of those jobs are fired out of Jenkins. And we use it to run some reports and lots of other little things. We're not there yet. We are working on our continuous integration, and we will eventually get to continuous delivery, which is the holy grail at the end of that. And we have one server that's dedicated to that, and you can set jobs so that when it asks Git, hey, has anything changed? And depending on how long it takes you to run your tests, you may want to put that on a timer. So every hour it says, has anybody checked anything in? And then you check it out, you run the entire test suite. And if you're at a place that's really bought into it, then it can move it to the next environment, run the test there, and if things are really good, you can push the code all the way to production without a human getting involved. In more regulated environments, maybe you want a few humans along the way. Yep. Yes. Yeah, it will, If you tell the server to shut down, that you're going to shut down, it'll just get put in a list. And then when the server comes back, it'll work its way through the backlog and try to do its best. Yeah. And if we go to a job, there is the disable project. And notice how many things are on the side here. When I disable it, that list gets slightly smaller because there's not a run the job button anymore. It won't let you. When I was moving some jobs from one server to another recently, I went through, wrote a script to grab all my config files, make a directory for each job and put the one config file in it, took them to the other server, dropped them right into place, and then went through, made sure they were all in an off. Oh, went in, told it, I'm going to shut down. Don't run any jobs. And then if you go to Manage Jenkins, the third one, Reload Configuration from Disk, this will read all your configuration files, and you're really only supposed to manage your configurations through the tool. I just put new configurations in that were edited somewhere else. So in order for it to know about them, you hit this button, it will read them all in. I then went through all the jobs, disabled everybody, and then at my leisure went back and edited them and made sure they were talking to the right servers as the right users and were otherwise adjusted for this environment. Yeah. So originally it was green and red for jobs finishing, and somebody realized there's color blindness, so they switched it to blue. Why didn't they change the shape? I don't know, but it's easy enough to put in a plug-in for that, just as it was to put in a plug-in to make it green again. There are lots and lots of plug-ins, and a fairly busy community, not quite like Perl, but pretty close. Their big conference is actually coming up in Santa Clara, California in September, I think 13th to the 15th. And they sent me a shirt when somebody on Twitter commented that I would be speaking on Jenkins, and actually, I'd almost forgotten, they also sent the standard Jenkins logo as a sticker. Jenkins a little more, I think, is a ninja, and Jenkins is a devil. So those are here for you to pick up on your way out. Anything else? We still have a couple minutes. Yeah. There is a command line interface. I don't remember how to get there right now, but it does exist and it's fairly useful. Anything else? Okay then. Thank you.